On April 27, 1822, Jesse Grant and Hannah Grant gave birth to Hiram Ulysses Grant, who would later change his name to Ulysses Simpson Grant. He was the oldest of his 2 brothers and 3 sisters and was said to be the most mischievous. Ulysses grew up around his father's business, which was a tannery, where animal hides were made into leather. His father wanted to hand the business down to him, but Ulysses had other plans.
He attended school and was very mischievous. His parents thought he'd be more successful at a different school, so they sent him off to Maysville, Kentucky, where he lived with his relatives and attended Richardson and Rand School. The next year he changed schools again. He moved to Ripley, Ohio to attend a private school. Once again, Grant's mischievous ways came about again in his 3rd school. His father knew his success rate wasn't going up, and he began to worry about his son's future.
When Jesse heard that there was a position open at West Point, he quickly wrote to Senator Thomas Morrow asking him to nominate his son. Even though Ulysses protested, he couldn't persuade his father into letting him stay, and before he knew it, Grant was off to West Point Academy.
Going into West Point, Grant was only 5 foot 1 inch and 177 pounds. He was very shy and made few close friends. In his horsemanship class, he showed off his incredible skills that often made the teachers look bad. Although Ulysses wanted no part in a future West Point military career, this is one of the few classes he enjoyed. In his 3rd year, Grant was promoted to sergeant, but later was demoted due to misconduct. In his senior year, Grant became very ill with typhus gripe, but managed to recover and graduate at age 21.
After graduating from West Point, Grant enlisted in the Army, exactly what he didn't want to do. When James Polk became president in 1845, he had America go to war with Mexico so that America could take California and the rest of the land nearby. Ulysses S. Grant was enlisted in the Army when the war started and considered not participating, because he believed that the war was unfairly provoked. Grant still decided to participate in the war because he saw it as a great opportunity for a promotion. Once Grant was placed in General Zachary Taylor's army, he was deployed at Port Veracruz, where he marched all the way to the capital. Once the war was over, Grant stayed enlisted in the Army. He was stationed in remote places in the Western Territories. While he was stationed in the territories, Grant was forced out of the Army due to excessive drinking problems. In 1854, he was forced to submit resignation. After the war, Grant, his new wife, Julia, and son struggled. He found out several jobs such as farming, being a real estate agent, engineer, and a clerk at a custom house. Grant's career was saved in 1861 when the Civil War outbroke.
On November 7, 1861, Brigadier General U.S. Grant left Cairo, Illinois by steamers in conjunction with 2 gunboats to make a demonstration against Columbus, Kentucky. The next morning, Grant learned that the Confederate troops had crossed the Mississippi River from Columbus to Belmont, Missouri, to intercept 2 detachments sent in pursuit of Brigadier General M. Jeff Thompson, and possibly to reinforce Major General Sterling Price's force. He landed on the Missouri shore out of the range of Confederate artillery at Columbus and started marching the mile to Belmont. At 9 o'clock in the morning, an engagement began. The Federals routed the Confederates out of their Belmont cantonment and destroyed the rebel supplies and equipment they found because they did not have the means to carry them off. The scattered Confederate forces reorganized and received reinforcements from Columbus. Counterattacked by the Confederates, the Union force withdrew, re-embarked, and returned to Cairo. Grant did not accomplish much in this operation, but at a time when little Union action occurred anywhere, many were heartened by any activity.
By February 6, 1862, Fort Henry, a Confederate earthen fort on the Tennessee River with outdated guns, was particularly inundated and the river threatened to flood the rest. On February 4th through 5th, General U.S. Grant landed his divisions in 2 different locations, one on the east bank of the Tennessee River to prevent the garrison's escape, and the other to occupy the high ground on the Kentucky side, which would ensure the fort's fall. Flag Officer Andrew H. Foote's 7 gunboats began bombarding the fort. General Lloyd Tillman, commander of the fort garrison, realized that it was only a matter of time before Fort Henry fell. While leaving artillery in the fort to hold off the Union fleet, he escorted the rest of his forces out of the area and sent them safely off on the route to Fort Donelson, 10 miles away. Tillman then returned to the fort and soon afterwards surrendered to the fleet, which had engaged the fort and closed within 400 yards. Fort Henry's fall opened the Tennessee River to the Union gunboats and shipped as far as Muscle Shoals, Alabama. After the fall of Fort Donelson, 10 days later, the 2 major transportation routes in the Confederate West, bounded by Appalachians and the Mississippi River, became the Union highways for movement in troops and material.
After capturing Fort Henry on February 6, 1862, Grant advanced cross-country to invest Fort Donelson. On February 16, 1862, after the failure of their all-out attack aimed at breaking through Grant's investment lines, the fort's 12,000-man garrison surrendered unconditionally. This was a major victory for Grant and a catastrophe for the South. It ensured that Kentucky would stay in the Union and opened up Tennessee for a northern advance along the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers. Grant received a promotion to Major General for his victory.
In dawn of April 6, 1862, Confederate General Albert Johnston and his troops attacked Grant's army when they were camped at the Tennessee River waiting for General Beale to join Grant. Grant and his men were surprised, and even though they overcame that surprise soon, the Union army surrendered after fighting for 6 hours in a wooded thicket known as the Hornet's Nest. Grant's army did their best to stall for time, and eventually General Beale joined Grant at night, increasing the number of troops by 23,000 men. With the break of dawn of April 7th, Grant pushed forward against the exhausted Confederate troops, and before long, the rebels hastily retreated.
In May and June of 1863, Major General Ulysses S. Grant's armies converged on Vicksburg, investing the city and entrapping a Confederate army under Lieutenant General John Pemberton. On July 4th, Vicksburg surrendered after prolonged siege operations. This was a culmination of one of the most brilliant military campaigns of the war. With the loss of Pemberton's army and this vital stronghold on the Mississippi, the Confederacy was effectively split in half. Grant's successes in the West boosted his reputation, leading ultimately to his appointment as General-in-Chief of the Union armies.
On October 17th, Grant learned that Confederates at Chattanooga were in control of two key points, Lookout Mountain and Missionary Ridge. Grant ordered his troops to force rebels to abandon the Lookout Mountain, and once that task was accomplished, he led a siege against the rebels at Missionary Ridge the next morning. With vigor, Grant's men attacked the ridge, and soon their mission was complete. As a result of Grant's actions, President Lincoln named him Lieutenant General in March of 1864.
The Overland Campaign was a series of battles fought in Virginia during May through June of 1864. Ulysses S. Grant directed the actions of the army, commanded by Major General George C. Meade, and other forces against Confederate Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. Although Grant suffered severe losses during the campaign, it was a strategic Union victory. It inflicted more losses on Lee's army and maneuvered it into a siege at Richmond and Petersburg in just over 8 weeks.
Grant sought to defeat Lee's army by quickly placing his forces between Lee and Richmond and inviting open battle. Lee surprised Grant by attacking the larger Union army aggressively in the Battle of the Wilderness, resulting in heavy casualties on both sides.
His predecessors in the Eastern Theater, however, Grant did not withdraw his army following the setback, but instead he maneuvered to the southeast, resuming his attempt to defeat Lee. Lee's army was able to get into position to block this movement. At the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, Grant repeatedly attacked segments of the Confederate defensive line, hoping for a breakthrough, but the only results were again heavy losses for both sides.
Grant maneuvered again, meeting Lee at North Anna River. Here, Lee had clever defensive positions that provided an opportunity to defeat parts of Grant's army, but illness prevented Lee from attacking in time to trap Grant. The final major battle of the campaign was at Cold Harbor from May 31st to June 12th, in which Grant gambled that Lee's army was exhausted and ordered a massive assault against strong defensive positions, resulting in heavy Union casualties.
Trying to maneuver a final time, Grant surprised Lee by stealthily crossing the James River, threatening to capture the city of Petersburg, the loss of which would doom the Confederates. The Richmond-Petersburg campaign was a series of battles around Petersburg in Virginia during June 9th of 1864 up until March 25th of 1865. It is more popularly known as the Siege of Petersburg. The campaign was 9 months of trench warfare.
General Ulysses S. Grant assaulted Petersburg unsuccessfully and then constructed trench lines that eventually extended over 30 miles from the eastern outskirts of Richmond, Virginia, to around the eastern and southern outskirts of Petersburg. Petersburg was crucial to the supply of Confederate Robert E. Lee's army and the Confederate capital of Richmond. Numerous raids were conducted and battles fought in attempts to cut off the railroad supply lines through Petersburg to Richmond. and many of these caused the lengthening of the trench lines, overloaded, dwindling Confederate resources. Lee finally yielded and abandoned both cities in April 1865, leading to his retreat and surrender at Appomattox Courthouse.
After the war ended, Ulysses S. Grant was well known as a war hero. Because he was so well known, he easily won the election of 1868 for president, and he ended up serving 2 terms. Grant was known for having corrupt office.